Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Masha Mikanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. On today's episode, Masha and I are excited to speak with author and founder Thomas Hartmann about his book, Project to Product Mode, a game plan to unlock scalability for B2B software products. So let's hop in. How you doing, Thomas?
Hey, thank you very much for having me. I'm doing great.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Great. Hey, Masha.
Matt, hey Thomas, welcome to the show. We know you for a while, but it took some time for us to get you on the show for technical reasons and other things. But I'm really glad that you are joining us. And you are coming all the way from Munich, right?
Yes, sitting here in Munich, Europe, and great to be on the show. Yeah.
Amazing.
That's great. We've had a number of guests, living in Germany, so it's great to have another one on the show.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of books recently that you are covering. We have a few in the pipeline for other authors that are publishing, which kind of a few years ago, someone told me that I should write a book, and I'm like, but everyone already wrote everything they could about product management. What is there else to write about? So, and then I've learned in so much other stuff. So that's good. That's always good. I love that. Tell us a bit about yourself and about your background. How did you get to product, where you are today? And then we will dive into the book.
Yeah, actually, I'm have more the entrepreneurship gene in myself, right? I was studying in San Francisco, got a little bit the entrepreneurship gene. I was coming back to Europe, and then like the lean startup wave totally hit me. I was at the lean startup machine here in Munich, and I was like, wow, this is like amazing. Like it helped me more than my whole studies, understanding entrepreneurship. So I wanted actually to do that. I did one or two projects, didn't work out as intended. Then I thought, okay, it's easy to take that knowledge and apply it in a corporate setup, and went into product management more or less, right? Then I did a couple of years, a lot of entrepreneurship programs where I helped like teams in companies develop products. That was a lot of fun. Then came Corona. And that was not possible because we always had like 30 people, in a room and stuff like that. So Sebastian told me, hey, let's take the same principles, right? Long stretching program, give input, and then your people need to apply it, and then feedback, and apply it to product management. And that's the Product Masterclass. And good program, really like it. The book basically came out of a project with a client. The company said, "Hey, Thomas, can you help us with product management?" And we looked at the company, and like from every angle we watched into the company, we would have defined it as project. And there, and there the story of the book started.
I see. So basically, one of the main problems or the main problems that you're getting and where organization need help is that they're really coming from that perspective, and they need to really understand what product management is before they even can actually learn
Yeah.
and apply it.
Yeah. But like there is one crucial separation of companies, right? If you look at that ICP for the book, it is a B2B software company. And B2B is really important because B2C behaves differently. And if you trace down why companies behave in a project way, it often has, like the birth of the company, the genes are infused. And in B2B, very often there is one big client wanting something, you produce it for them, and then you think, oh wow, such a nice software we've built. I wonder if we can resell it, right?
Yeah.
And from there on, like the genes, the thinking, the project thinking is infused into the DNA of the company.
What something that stood out to me was what you call project stacking, where every project is coming in new things. They like some things and they want new things. And before you know it, you're stacking project after project after project. And then you have to maintain all these different projects. And they're not really a product. They're a bunch of potentially disassociated projects.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And like what I just, like the first step is you have one client and you think, great, we built the software for these guys. And then you think, okay, but we need to be able to resell that, right? And the second client says basically, awesome, I need something like that. But like I don't need this and I need a little bit more on that, right? So 80% same, 20% on top, and like 10% or 20% you leave. That's not a problem for the second client, right? Because you have so much already. But the problem comes if you stack these projects, right? And you have like 10 times 20% of on top and 10% left, then you have like so many exceptions, and then the maintenance becomes really complex.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It boggled my mind also sometimes, and I'm teaching at a university, and it highlights over there many times that people outside of product, they really just in their head, they don't, they immediately go to project. So I'm telling people I'm a product manager, and in a sentence after that, they call me a project manager.
Yeah.
Not even talking, and I'm not even talking about like at work, what
Mhm.
Matt mentioned about being directed
Mhm.
into doing projects, because
Yeah,
that happens a lot at work that they assume that you will do the project management as well. I'm talking just in general, understanding that there are two different disciplines. They have two different needs and two different risks associated with them and two different things that you have to manage. And actually, when I'm teaching my students, I'm very adamant to teach them about the differences.
Mhm.
So, catch them young so they understand it. And
Mhm.
hopefully they will, when they go somewhere and
Yeah,
work, they will know the difference, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so is that something that you're seeing as well? Is that your experience as well?
Totally. And but for me, to understand whether you in a project culture or a product culture, there is one simple trick. You just need to look at where the product is defined, which gets built. In a project company, typically that is a client in cooperation with with sales or something like that, right? They define what's being built and then they push it into the organization. They give it product management. And product management, if everything is defined what you need to build,
Hmm.
like what's the product management part there? It's
Yeah.
actually only project management. You look on the time, you look on the date, and you look on the quality. Like
You just
these are
deliver.
the measures.
You
Hmm?
just deliver it and that's it.
Exactly, it's a delivery. So that's
Mhm.
project management. Yeah, product management implies that you think like, okay, which market should we catch? Like, what product should we actually build? And
Mhm.
if, like if the decision what to be built is already done by the client in cooperation, maybe with sales or, any other stakeholder, often, like the CEO, charismatic person, right? They know somebody through network, and then they say, okay, let's build for these people the software, let's adapt it. Then, like everything is actually already set in stone what needs to be built.
Mhm.
By definition, you don't need a discovery anymore, right?
Yeah.
You don't need more or less prioritization in a product sense is not the case, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To me, one of the signs that I look for is what do they celebrate? But
What
you're
do
right,
they?
because what you're saying is more of a leading indicator. For me, it's more of a lagging.
Ah,
But the celebration of, and that's what when I was a developer, I used to celebrate that for many, many years. I finished working on something and I deliver it. I'll do a party.
mm,
So I delivered a
mm,
huge project that ran for a year and whatever it is. We did a big
got it.
party. We bought a lot of food. We celebrated that. What happened after that? Who cared? I mean,
Yeah, shipment
if you
versus
celebrate,
It's
so
shipped and
that celebrated the outputs, right? But
yeah,
if you celebrate the outcomes, and rarely do I see people celebrate the outcomes,
yeah.
that's where
Interesting.
I'm like, okay, so they are more product than project.
Interesting, because like that's one mindset we didn't look at. Like we have like seven mindsets or seven areas where we looked at and said, okay, they have different mindsets, right? For segmentation, totally different mindset, right? For pricing, totally different mindset. So we looked at the companies where they have different mindsets, but we didn't come up with the a little bit value versus impact, of course. But
Mhm.
as you said, like celebration,
Yeah,
we don't have.
it's a symptom maybe more than anything, but
Yeah,
you might want to edit in the next version of the book. I don't know. I mean, I'm
yeah,
just saying. So
yeah, yeah,
And I like that thought of, celebrating the outcome. And then another point that you had, Thomas, that resonated with me is around the sales. Sales is incentivized to sell things. They want features. They want, customer wants this and that, and we need to build this. So, with that pipeline of requests coming in, it can often clog the production
yeah,
of great products. So, from the other end of the spectrum, it's like putting a filter on the beginning of things to
yeah.
filter things down so that your team isn't
Mm,
overwhelmed and
mm.
can really focus on the product side of things.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like, like if you think about it in a project company, right? Sales is incentivized to make things more complex, more bigger, right? Take a Deloitte or EY or whatever, SAP agency or something like that, right? I don't care if BMW wants everything, implemented their way. It's just, like I charge my hourly rate. So the more complex, the more revenue. Great.
Hmm.
I get, like 3% kickback as a salesperson. Nice.
Hmm. Yeah.
The more complex, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah. As
And
a
all that goes inside a project. So then that's like a project brief of like, hey, we can build all these different things for for BMW or something like that,
yeah,
just for example. And then like
yeah,
it becomes a project mindset, and we can deliver it on this X June 1st. And that's
exactly.
yeah.
Everything, like in project mindset, everything is possible. If
Mm,
it's complex, no problem. We just
hmm.
ask ourselves, can we build that? And in terms of software, basically almost everything is possible to build, right?
Especially
Right.
this.
Hmm?
But should we do it? I
Yeah.
think that's like
Should
this.
we do it?
Yeah. Should we do it?
But
Hmm.
like where come that, like where's the idea of should we do it is in project management, right? In project management, we ask ourselves, okay, which feature can we win a market, right? But if you define already in the very front end of the company, right? Like in sales and in sales marketing and customer, if they decide already what's to be built, you don't need the question, should we build it anymore? They are annoyed, right? You know the situation, right? Sales sold something, they come to product and you say, hey, great, let's do a product discovery. And they're like, oh, no, product wants to talk again. Like, I know exactly what I want, right? Here, delivery date. I want a delivery date.
Hmm.
When, when is it ready?
Yep.
Right? These requests, either for sales, but also from other stakeholders in the company, right? They basically give you an idea, and all they want in return is a shipping date.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and one of the things that I was always thinking about sales is that sales are very much short-term driven. Their landscape is this year, how much they have to make this year, what is their... And I remember in the days that I worked very closely with sales, every beginning of the year or the end of the previous year, they will create a budget and say, this is how much
Yeah,
we have to
yeah,
sell this.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so they're driven very much by that short term.
Mm.
And because they're driven by short term, their thinking is also short term thinking. And that's where building features for whoever going to pay for it is making a lot of sense.
Yeah,
But for the product, there is never a short term without the long term. And if we just
yeah,
build a short term, it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a
yeah.
really big mess.
Yep.
But like we don't want to bash too much on sales because they are
No, of
actually,
course not.
like
Of course not.
it's just an expression of, like the two different mindsets.
Yes.
No, but you can steer these mindsets within your company. So if like the level above these CPOs and chief of sales, right? The level above, right? So getting a picture together, that's actually the most important to change behavior. But somehow you need to change, right?
Yeah. So let's
Right.
talk
And then
about
maybe
that. That's a good
yeah, maybe that
thing.
gets into the egg yolk and egg egg-shaped organization analogy
Yeah,
you have.
Let's talk about that. Explain what that is. We see the picture behind you,
yeah, yeah,
and that's an analogy that you're using a lot. And
yeah.
then we can talk also about, how do you
Mm,
explain in the book to
mm,
move one mindset to the other mindset to help
yeah.
everyone?
So the egg analogy basically describes that in product and tech, many people have, this product mindset. They go to conference, they listen to, I don't know, they see the best, product people, Marty Kagan, whatsoever, read the best book, product discovery and so on and so forth, right? And then they live in an environment in a company where people give them finished ideas, and all they want in exchange is a finishing date. That's the reality for a lot of people out there, right?
Mm.
That's because, product and tech, they sit in a bubble, and that's the egg yolk, right? They have the product mindset, but everybody around them, they don't want iteration. They don't want, sprints. They give them an idea and say, I don't know if you do, sprints, stand-ups, morning yoga, whatsoever. Give me a finishing date. So it's a total different mindset around them.
Mhm.
And the question is how you can actually, develop such an organization in order to be more product focused and more product driven. Yeah. That's basically the challenge. Yeah. And I think, like many people, if they listen, they will emphasize with that. They say like, okay, I have the same. It's always a struggle. If I want to do product discovery, they say like, okay, we already know what we don't want. Yeah. And that's the ag organization. You sit in product and tech, total different mindset than the rest of the organization.
So what do
Can
you
you
have to
emphasize
do? You have to
that?
scramble that egg? I mean,
Yeah, we have to scramble the eggs.
You have to
Yeah,
break some eggs, scramble them
to
up.
make
yeah,
it work, do we have to scramble it, or is there other ways, to do it?
yeah. Not sure. Yeah, it's good.
Sunny side up.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that
Mm.
depends. Like I would not argue that every company needs to be a product company. I think there is beautiful companies out there based on projects. Yeah, architecture, for example, and many more, right? Or like take the Deloitte, Accenture, and so ever. I think it's Accenture, 50, 60 billion revenue, right? They do a lot of money, basically based on projects. Yeah. So you don't need necessarily, it's a strategic decision. Yeah. Most companies want to become a product company.
You focus on segments. So, but from a B2B SaaS perspective, it's probably a different
Mhm.
approach.
No, I think, every company wants to be more profitable and more scalable.
Hmm.
And that is the driver behind being a product company. Like if we go back to our project organization, first project, then they want to resell it. Why do they want to resell it? More revenue, more earnings. And then they sell it a third time and they think they built a product company, but it's not a product company, right? They're stacking projects. But
Right.
like behind every transformation from project to product is always at the end of the day scalability and profitability.
Yeah.
Hmm. And it's easier to scale and be profitable when you're focusing on individual segments, not individual customers.
Well, that's the market, really.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the examples that you gave, Deloitte and Accenture, are actually very good examples for companies that don't necessarily build for themselves, they build for someone else. And that's why
Mhm.
projects might make a lot of sense. But when they build for their clients, if the client
Mhm.
that they build for is a company that deliver products to their clients,
Mhm.
there is a big issue over there.
Mhm.
So that's where I think that again, not bashing into anyone, and yes, there is definitely great cases where project is working very well, but it has to be also with the end customers in mind and the outcomes that you're trying to get to the
Mhm.
organization that pay for the project. And
Mhm.
and if the outcome is not there, it might be a bit of problem with the fit between who is building it to what they're trying to get. So, but let's dive in a bit more into the book, right? Into what do you teach people in the book that how to move from the project mindset to the product mindset, or the project mode to the product mode?
So what we see is that this, moving from project to product is such a huge and complex complex thing that most people don't see the big picture, right? I think the big picture, the first thing they feel is that engineering is overwhelmed. So the first assumption is always our engineering is weak. They ship not, they can't handle it anymore and whatsoever. But tying it towards, a bad segmentation or a pricing problem, having this big picture, that is really, really hard. And it took even us, like a very long time to think about it and, like come up with this. We have like the 7 challenges, 7 mindset challenges, changing from going from project to product, right? And we deliberately tried to make the book as slim and short to read as possible, to only, give the big picture. Yeah, what do you need to change? Yeah. And basically, like I told you about the first client we had, and we said like, okay, this is project, and we compared it with product mindset. We knew, and we had like 7 areas where we said, okay, this is totally different in project companies than in product companies. Yeah, and that is segmentation. Project companies don't need segmentation; they just need a client who can pay, and then you get everything built. Pricing is totally different. Yeah, pricing is in project companies, basically time and material plus 25%, 50%, whatever margin, right? Product companies, totally different. They build something for a market and they price with value.
Yeah.
Then discovery, you don't need it in project companies. Yeah, you don't need a discovery because, like your client tells you 100% what they want. Take an architecture studio, right? Individual client, yeah. Or the I don't know, the ship company which creates the yacht for Jeff Bezos, right? He knows what he wants, right? Product management, the organization is different, right? The one is only the only one is project management based on scheduling and organizing things. The other one is on thinking about what to build next. Then prioritization. Yeah, in project, it's mostly the loudest or the most important client defining what to build next. And product companies, it's different. You think, okay, what's more value? Then we have engineering part, push versus pull. In great product companies, they pull more the work or the epics or the iterations or the items, which is validated. Versus in product management, in project companies, everybody is pushing into engineering. And we have configuration, and configuration is really important, right? Product companies, by focusing on a segment, they understand, okay, how are processes running in different companies, and where do we need to be adaptable in the process, right? And if I have many clients who do one step in a process different, I tend to make the software configurable, which gives me, more headspace, more time for the other things in engineering. So these are the seven, segments or 7 challenges where product companies think differently and act differently like project companies.
I think I'm missing one. So you said segmentation, pricing, discovery, prioritization, engineering, configuration.
Yeah. Product management as a product, the product organization, right? The product organization itself, the one is only project only, not only the one is I schedule things and organize everything. The other one is significantly different. A product manager needs to be able to talk to end customers, right? You need to be able to validate in the market.
So
And
the fact that you have even this entity in the organization.
Yeah.
But
So,
even then they are living in the yoke and sometimes they are given those projects.
Exactly. They're given the project and they don't have a mandate to talk to the end customer.
Hmm.
Because if you live in such an organization where it's basically project driven, a product manager, and you say, okay, I want to talk to the end customer, sales fears that you mess up their incentives or whatever, right? So
I've been
they're really
there.
protective.
I've been there myself, and I
Mhm.
had to find ways to reach out to the users. So I found my ways.
Yeah, but you need to go the extra mile then, right? And you
Yes.
know, like you're senior and but like have somebody not that experienced, they comply with what's around them. They
Yes,
comply with the
absolutely.
project organization.
Absolutely. And you still don't want to make enemies in the organization. So you want it to be transparent and you want them to know about it. And in the
Yeah,
first few times, they ask you to be there first and to make sure you're not saying anything that you shouldn't say and all of that stuff. So
yeah.
you have to gain their trust.
Yeah, and that's, like also on leadership level, because now if you want to change, like the one person responsible for the change is product leadership,
Hmm.
right? But it's really hard because once you want to try to change the whole organization, people, just like you said, right? Other people, other departments try to push you back towards your realm of
Yeah.
of how
Back
do you
in,
say?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, back to your line and don't get out of line. So
What?
what are the means? How do you teach organizations to move from one mindset to the other? So identifying it is very helpful, but
Yeah.
doing the work is the hard part. Well, maybe not once you identify what it is. I don't know. Tell us what's the steps to go there?
I think, like the first one is really recognize that you are in such an organization. Because like you think you are in a product organization, like they call you product manager, everything is term product, but like you need to look, you know what is really the culture. Are we living in a product company or not, right? So everybody can do that themselves, right? And then I think there is a couple of steps you need to take with your organizations. Yeah. So first, you want to align leadership on the fact that you are, a project organization. Yeah, and like we have on our website like a free assessment, so you can, like make an assessment, you can give it to your colleagues, you can compare score, and then you can, bounce ideas or, like talk about it, right? The second step is, like this is like okay, awareness. The second step is you need to somehow find alignment among all product leaders on what to change. And that is really, really hard, right? Because somebody will lose a little bit power or, some processes will be different afterwards.
Mm,
Uh, Different people will do different stuff. Maybe you need to fix something in engineering, maybe you need to fix something in, segmentation. You need to change something, and change inherently is hard.
yeah.
So, the one thing we found very helpful is if you gather leadership and you explain how everything is connected,
Mhm.
how segmentation is connected with, push versus pull, and how discovery is connected with pricing and configuration, like how everything, is tied together. And then you ask the question, what do we need to change in order to be more scalable?
Mhm.
Because, like all leadership together to have one goal, be more scalable, be more profitable.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
and that is the buy-in. That is the buy-in that you need, yeah, to have certain people, say, okay, let's, change X, Y, Z. And like the changes in every organization, it's a little bit different, right? Because the culture is different, the heritage is a little bit different. So it's not that every company has the same steps to take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this
But
is what you describe as doing an X-ray. I think you call it an X-ray of your business
yeah,
to really
yeah.
look underneath things.
So X-ray, what we did is like, like we had that first client, right? And we said like, okay, how do we do that? And I said, okay, let's do a workshop. Then I said to Sebastian, yeah, workshop is great, but like in a workshop, you never create solutions. You need to create a solution beforehand that you can, get in the workshop the commitment, right? So then, like with the first client, we scheduled calls with every executive before the workshop. And then we discussed, like, then we saw, okay, like there's something really, really different. Yeah. And then that is the X-ray. Analyze your organization, right? Talk to the different stakeholders, yeah, and see their perspective.
Yeah.
And, like that
Cover it.
is, yeah. And that I think for product leaders, that is the best thing you can do. Go to each stakeholder and ask them the question, how can I support you to be more scalable? Right? Because then you have like this discussion one-on-one, and it gives you a lot of insights on how like how your organization is at the moment structured, the X-ray. Yeah, you analyze your company from within, and that gives you the picture where you're standing. And there's, like a ton of helpful questions and, things in the book, or you use the assessment. But this is like, you need to first understand yourself. What's the impact on our pricing or, like on the specials we build on our product discovery or product department, or how is prioritization, like who is truly the driver because behind the decisions, and like what is the maintenance tax? We call it maintenance tax, right? The share of maintenance and support you have in your engineering department, right? If you collect a lot of individual clients over the years, you have a really high maintenance tax. You have very little capacity left for building new features. Yeah, and that's a sign of, like having
Yeah,
a
you mentioned configuration as one of those things that kind of unlocks scalability. Does also configuration at scale also create that maintenance from an engineering and product standpoint? Like, hey, I guess I'll use that egg analogy. You
Mm,
have your egg and you could crack it and fry
mm.
it, scramble it. You could do a bunch of different things with it, but that's the configuration of things. But does that also that allows scalability of your egg, but it also potentially adds, back end maintenance cost.
Yeah, but like if you like configuration is really interesting because like it
Hmm.
can be a solution to be more scalable in a certain segment, right? So
Hmm.
scalability means I'll take away workload from my engineering department and outsource it to a third party or my client.
Mm.
Right? If you think like, okay, I have a build generation engine and they can, replace their own logo, the client does it for me, right? Very simple thing, right? Shopify, for example, they just have an API, and a plugin system.
Hmm.
So if you want to build a fancy configurator for your e-bikes, no problem, right? This is my standard, which is super scalable. And whatever you want to put on top, right? You just outsource it to a third party or to your client, right? SAP
Yeah.
works, the same way. And these are smart moves, right? Where you actually try to limit the workload for your own engineering department.
Hmm.
Yeah. But, to be able, like if you make a configurator for your clients, for example, right? Um, you need to be able to say or to tell how the processes of your clients work, right?
Hmm.
Like if you have a configurator,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
you need to know the processes, right?
Mhm.
In order to know the processes, you need a product department which does product discovery.
Right.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah,
if they're out there configuring it, you have to understand what they're doing to configure.
what they're
And
doing,
where's the
right?
value? Like, why are they having to do this? We could make this out of the
Exactly.
box. Right.
Yeah, because if you don't know that, you build a
Hmm.
configurator which is really expensive and is then not used by any clients or
Hmm.
just by one,
Mhm.
right? So, and that's a good example for how you see like how everything is intertwined.
Right.
So
Interesting.
build a configurator, but make sure with your product in discovery that there is a market, because then you can communicate from product department in the other way there and in the other direction. Beforehand we had like client and sales, they communicate to product, they communicate to engineering. If okay, I know the processes, we built this configurator, which gonna be great, and we can, win 100,000 clients. You communicate to marketing and to sales that in half a year you're gonna launch this awesome epic thing, right? And they think, okay, how can we communicate it to the market? The communication in that case goes totally in the other direction, 180 degrees. And that's product communication, goes from product management within. Of course, it's not in isolation. You talk to, sales and customers and marketing and everything. Yeah. But like you consolidate a picture more or less, right? That's the job of product management, right? Find
Mhm.
out, okay, like what do we believe as a company will be most valuable to produce in the next step.
We talked about understanding the first step, the second step, align the leadership. Then third step, and I'm reading from the book. Uh,
Yeah.
um, you can fix everything at once, and that was really my next question. Like
Yeah.
we know that you can fix everything at once, and it's also sometimes it never works when you try to fix everything at once. Depends on the size of the organizations, but you worked with some very big organizations. So where do we start?
It depends on the company, really. Like, but like we typically it's really 1 or 2 points when we can agree. Like sometimes it's 3 areas, yeah, where we agree we want to get better. And I think this is a good start, right? Sometimes it's product and segmentation. Sometimes it's pricing and discovery, or sometimes it's configuration. And it it's never, there is no clear boilerplate or hierarchy of the seven things which you need to focus on. It tends to be the topics on the we pictured it as a funnel, right? So you have work coming through sales, and because that's mostly defining the work you do in the following steps in product and engineering, mostly there is one topic, one item at least, in this top list, yeah. But like that's the next step. Agree on, okay, like what do we focus on? What do we want to change? And then, step 4 is you need to enable your workforce.
Mhm.
Just because you and, like your leadership peers did agree on something, but you need to enable your workforce. Every change requires, adaptation of the organization, of the thinking, of things doing, right? Imagine you adapt your segmentation, right? Most likely you need to have different marketing. Yeah. Most likely you have a different structure. If you change your pricing, that most likely gonna hurt in the one or the other case, right? So you need to be able to communicate and like reason for that, right? If you want to build up your product department, right? You need to give it a structure. You need to have roles defined. You need to define, okay, what they are responsible. Yeah, that is often missing in these companies
Mhm.
because they operated so far in a scheduling mode. They
Mhm.
never done discovery, so you need to build up these structures. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So that's the enablement part, right?
Yeah. So even organizations that on paper do have product teams, but they
Yeah,
still do product theater and they do project management,
yeah,
they need to realize that and do the next step of moving them to discovery and moving them to other
yeah,
places. So really
yeah,
what we're saying is look at the 7 areas and in those 7 areas see what's the first focus that make a change.
yeah.
Hmm.
Well, like as an individual product manager, your influence is somewhat limited. Yeah, but you can also influence, like, I think the product leader is the one responsible for the change. But
Hmm.
like in to some degree, as a product manager, you can also influence the product leader, right? But at the end of the day, the product leader is there to design the environment or change the environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Many product leaders, they focus on the egg yolk, right? Let's do OKRs, let's do, like discovery process or something like that. Yeah? But it won't change the egg white. I think the product leader is there to focus on the environment the product team is working on
Mm.
to have a real impact or a real change. Meta's thinking, yeah.
We often talk about AI on the show. We talk about that quite a bit. It comes up quite a bit. And I'm
Mm,
thinking about the rigidity of project mindset in the world of AI. So I just don't
mm,
think companies and people can think with project mindsets of like, we know everything and we have a deadline and we're going to get this done. I'm thinking back to Moshe's point on we celebrated because we got this thing out and then we just leave it on a shelf. In the
mm.
world of AI, I don't think we have, I don't think people can lean on project mindsets. I think we're going to have to be iterative and think in a product mindset. And I think that's probably where a leader from a product perspective can come in and be like, hey, AI agents and orchestration and all these things are really disrupting. Even we see it a lot with the SaaS model itself from a business model perspective. So yeah, I just think that
Mm.
like people are going to have to like start to adapt mindsets in the long term from project
Yeah.
to product, and AI is going to be a disruptor in that.
Yeah, but like the all we talked about, it was a AI-free session so far, right?
Yeah.
But like AI is unbelievable. Yeah. But AI will not change your mindset. So everything we talked about is basically how you think about things, right? How I think about segmentation, how I think about pricing, how I think about, who's deciding. Like this is not direct, or am I wrong? No, I don't think it's directly. Like, I think, a bad organization. Okay, let me start differently. A fool with a tool is still a fool.
Mhm.
A
Hmm.
bad,
That's
a
true.
bad, a bad PM with AI is a even worse PM because there comes even more trash output. A good PM with AI is an excellent PM.
Hmm.
A bad organization with AI is a really bad organization.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
like if your structure is that you just build what the client say and they say, okay, give me now I think you built the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not a solution. I think it's more,
There's a mindset approach to it, but there's the project to product is a mindset, but it's also a physical, tangible thing that people do.
yeah.
It's beyond. So I think that's where I'm getting at. Like a
Mm.
mindset, but actually putting hands on keyboards and doing it and executing it, it becomes a tangible thing.
Let me give an example that comes to mind, and we chatted about it a bit in the last few days. I read recently about a company, and this is under the talk of is AI killing SaaS? That there is no
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
future for SaaS anymore.
Mm.
And I read
Mm.
an article in an article recently. I read that a company canceled their CRM account for $350,000 with a very big CRM
Mm.
provider
Mm.
because the person responsible for their CRM, whoever that was in the leadership, on the weekend build with Lovable or whatever product a CRM system. Now,
Wow.
this is definitely a project mindset because I'm
Mm.
sure that he or she didn't, they, let's say, didn't tested all the different things that they do with the CRM and do validation that whatever the AI built for them on that weekend is
Mm.
exactly what they needed for their organization.
Mm.
All they really wanted is a bottom line of I'm saving $350,000. And this project that I did on the weekend with this tool, with this AI tool, gave me the output that I needed.
Mm.
I would really love to be the fly on the wall over there to see how that works for him, for
Hmm.
Mm.
them. Because this is really a project mindset. It's not a product mindset to say, and I'm sure that person doesn't know all the permutations of how his team is using the CRM system, right?
Mm.
So AI, that's exactly like what Thomas was saying. A fool with a tool doesn't make him smarter. So yes, you can use the AI as a tool to create something, but is that the right thing for that organization?
Hmm.
No. My guess.
Hmm. I mean, interesting. I think there's pros and cons. What's the impact? I'll think for the moment AI is always on top, right? We also thought a lot about the product masterclass, right? If we just want to do a program only AI in there. But at the end of our thought process, which took us 2, 3 months, yeah, was like, okay, you need to nail the basics.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you don't get the benefit of AI.
Right.
And like for me personally, my experience, I do a lot with AI, but I think it's really hard, yeah, because you need to review so much stuff. It spits out a lot of stuff, yeah, but to detect where it's wrong in this whole 15 pages, yeah, which it created for me, that's the hard part, right?
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that takes seniority, right?
Yeah.
Because a junior just takes it 100% granted and like, okay, nice,
Oh, it's
here we
done. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
search you. Wonderful.
You need experience. You need to know what you're talking about, what you're looking at,
Yeah,
and connect the dots with other things that are not there.
yeah, and follow all the thoughts from the AI in this huge document.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
not
We
that
just did a
easy.
series on it, and Moshe and I both agreed, like the vibe from vibe coding to actual production level work. I mean, it just we're not there, and replacing tools internally or externally, like we're not there. But
So maybe
despite all the kind of hype you see around it.
maybe this will be another indicator for you to understand who is in project mode and who is in product mode, how they
Hmm.
utilize AI and how they make decisions about that.
Hmm.
Because I'm kind of going back to the egg analogy. Like it's not just product; it's the business itself. How does sales and marketing and
Yeah,
all these
absolutely.
other mechanisms, operational side, like how are they thinking about it? Like if they're all in that project mindset and they implement AI, like are they having to adapt and change and think about things and is it kind of forming? Is it changing that egg shape whatnot?
Yeah.
I don't think it's changing the egg shape because if I have a project culture, right, and a customer comes and says, okay, can you build me this AI feature? You push it the same, it doesn't matter. It's just a technology. It doesn't matter if I have like anything else, anything with AI or without AI. It's, like it's going the same steps, right? So you push that into your organization. It comes at product management. Product management cannot talk to other customers and can see whether it really has an impact. So you build that one thing for this one clients, yeah, and it goes into engineering and production, right? And then you do that 5 times. You have 5 different versions of whatsoever, and you need to maintain it. And most likely, it's even worse for AI applications.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah, yeah,
interesting thing.
because like if I'm a product company, I think differently about AI because like
Hmm.
I go there and say like, okay, what is the job to be done we do for our clients today? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And how can I fundamentally change that or improve that with AI? So I come totally different direction, right? And
Hmm.
then I make an assumption, right? And say like, okay, how about XYZ, right? How about we build this feature or that feature? And then I try to validate it with, 3, 4, 5, 10 clients. And maybe I get pre-sales or whatsoever. So I have an indication. Yeah. And then I say, okay, this is my bet, right?
Yeah.
1.5 months later, we're gonna start, marketing sales, please communicate, see that we can win a market. So, communication this direction. Beforehand, client tells me I want to have fancy AI. You push it into the organization. We celebrate when we shipped it, and nobody cares what's happening afterwards.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it
So,
is definitely a very good telltale over there, looking at how AI is being used there.
Hmm.
I really like that. Matt, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm all good. We got our AI talking, so I'm,
yeah.
I'm all set.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We always also like to ask our authors and other product people if there is any specific product that you like and you would like to suggest other product people that listen to this to use or to look at to try.
Uh, I mean, at the moment, like I'm blown away by Cloud Code, like everybody. Yeah. So I never written a line of code before November 2025. Since then, I built my own app. I built my own, browser plugin. I built, like crazy stuff. A game for Christmas. I don't know if you saw that. I built, like so many, just playing around with a lot of stuff, and yeah, mind blowing what these tools can do.
So from that perspective, in a product mode organizations, do you feel that product managers need to now touch the code and start writing code?
So the future for me in product management looks, the product manager is more the driver of decisions because he gets way more independent. And let me explain a little bit, right? So if I have Cloud Code on my computer, right, and I have access to my Git repository or the Git repository, I can just, check how functions work at the moment on my page. Yeah. I remember when I was product manager, how often I needed to discuss with engineers to understand how our, processes, search, whatever works today, right? Today, I just go there, take it, let AI explain how our software works at the moment, right? Incredible time saving. Then, next step, I got input from my leadership or whatever. We have a feature epic whatsoever. I just brainstorm ideas how that could actually look like. Yeah, and I do that by taking screenshots or ask my designer if he has a design repository which I can use within Cloud Code or any other coding tool, right? And then I play around with it and I come up with ideas. I maybe, like have user interviews where I can, in the interview, change the interface. How insane is that? Right? And then I have a pretty good picture of what I want to build. Yeah. Maybe I created with AI already an architecture document which describes how we run actually. Yeah. And I built basically a picture of that functionality, which I then, give to my designer, poke with my engineers, with my like, but it's so much more powerful because all the dependencies they get slashed, yeah. But the interesting question I ask myself, there is a lot of responsibility you put on, that's a lot of weight as well, right? Does it really make sense? Like the designer, like if they do a design repository, of course, Cloud Code can use that to build the design, right? But like should I do that as a product manager really, or should it? So that
I think that's
becomes
where,
the next.
yeah, I agree. I think that's where we're at. We kind of have to draw a line somewhere. Moshe and I talk about this quite often. Like, at what point do you draw the line and say, okay, I have to talk to designers, I have to talk to my developers?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
if product managers are just running around writing code,
I
like
even need
in
them.
Cloud Code, like, where's the go to market? Where's the
Or
talk
that I
to the
even need
customer?
Yeah.
designers and developers. Some
yeah,
organizations
yeah,
seems now to put all of that on the product manager. And,
yeah.
and to me, this is really, pushing it.
The division of work, like we had
Right.
like an agreement for the last two decades, yeah,
Yeah,
centuries,
or so.
decades.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a clear division, but now it vanishes a little bit, right? Because, like, and I'm not sure, like how the future will be. But at the moment, it's an exciting time for product managers because, like in small companies, you basically already can, like almost ship something, right? And if it's, like we also have a lot of discussions about, okay, should a product manager ship something which is in production or not? What would you say?
I think it goes back to the project mode versus product mode. And I think that companies in project mode will encourage their product managers to do that because for them it's all about shipping things faster with less resources, less money involved, less time.
Mm.
That's what they care about. Where in a product mode, there will be more mindful about the fact that product manager's job is not to ship code, but is to validate that we're building the right thing.
I'm very much focused on strategy and scalability, and I
Exactly.
like a lot of the business processes. I like working with finance and all those. So it's like if I'm doing this other thing, then
Yeah.
like I'm losing. I have it's a give and take. You have to cut something,
Yeah.
prioritization effort. And I'm also thinking about the engineer. Like so, you also see, oh, engineers can now do more product management stuff. But in my travels, I haven't talked to engineers that
Mm.
want to focus on price and packaging. Do engineers want to be PMs? Do PMs want to be engineers? I think like the tripod, like of design, engineering, and product still works, but I think AI ultimately makes all of us more powerful. It ultimately doesn't replace us. It just makes us better at our jobs. So
Maybe it will be that the product manager does all these things in the discovery, right? So if I'm sure what I want to build,
Yeah.
I give it the
mhm.
professionals, right?
Yeah.
But while testing, if it works, I don't want to be dependent on, like
Yeah.
waiting until next week until I can talk to my designer if I just want to, run three interviews with a customer, right?
I think this is the solution for the dual track scrums that we used to practice because we needed the developers and the designers time for all of that. But now
Mhm.
that the product managers can do all of that with all of those AI tools, we can kind of solve that problem, right?
Mhm.
But what this discussion kind of sharpened for me is all of those behaviors that we're seeing and what people are saying about this is what it should be, this is what they should do, and all of that stuff really indicates back to these two modes, project or product. So thank you for that, Thomas, because that's really cleared up things
Oh,
for me
yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you
amazing.
for having me. It was really a great discussion or
Our
conversation.
pleasure.
Yeah, thank
Our
you.
pleasure. Our pleasure.
Mm.
Amazing. Where can people reach out to you, Thomas?
Productmasterclass.com. There is everything. There is also a free assessment for the book. And I mean the book, it's really like a 3 hours read. So if you are in that situation that you feel that you are encapsulated in a project company, then I think it will give you good hints on where to start and what to change.
Yeah. And we should mention that your partner at Product Masterclass and to write the book is
Sebastian.
Sebastian Borggrewe. How do you pronounce his last name?
Sebastian Borggrewe.
Borggrewe.
Yeah.
Borggrewe.
Yes.
Amazing.
He will do the next podcast with you.
Oh,
I would
amazing.
love. Oh,
Perfect.
that's great. Love to have you back. Love to have you both on.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Thomas. It's been an absolute pleasure talking today. And thank you, Michelle. Thank you to all the listeners. And we'll talk to everybody next time. Take care.
Likewise. Bye bye.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate the feedback and support. Please leave us a review to help others find the show on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to the show.